Hello, thank you for taking out the time. This video is on the Nakshatra of Pushya. Pushya falls in the sign of Cancer entirely, and as per mythology, it's ruled by Lord Brihaspati. As usual, I'm going to be sharing the mythology linked to Lord Brihaspati first, and in the second half of this video, I'm going to be explaining how different planets behave in Pushya. Lord Brihaspati is the teacher of the gods. The gods also need guidance, direction, and that's provided by Lord Brihaspati. Whilst doing my research on Pushya, it reminded me of the initial phrases from the Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna is described as the milker of the elixir contained in the Bhagavad Gita. So he is extracting the milk, that spiritual wisdom. Lord Brihaspati has a similar job. He is extracting that spiritual wisdom and is imparting that to the gods, which in turn is passed on to us. So righteousness, truthfulness, a spiritual way of thinking is very closely linked to Pushya. We are now in the realm of philosophy. We are now in the realm of finding the true purpose of life. That's what Pushya is linked to. Lord Brihaspati is also known to be the divine form of Jupiter and is also exalted in this nakshatra. Jupiter also represents knowledge, wisdom, spirituality, righteousness, truthfulness, and it makes sense that Jupiter finds itself exalted in this position. I'm sure you're getting the sense that this is a very auspicious section of the sky. So if you have a few planets in this section of the sky, or you have your rising here, you should consider yourself to be very lucky. Lord Brihaspati is depicted sitting on a lotus flower, and that lotus flower is considered as one of the symbols of this nakshatra. That symbolizes the ability of the Pushya native to rise above things of the physical world. Name, fame, money, relationships, etc., and look at life differently. See life for what it is. What is the purpose of life? So you rise above your mundane duties of life and you search for that. It's not going to be of any surprise to you that this nakshatra possesses the gana, the temperament belonging to a divine force. So this nakshatra is a lot to do with divinity, with spirituality, with philosophical way of life. Going back to Lord Brihaspati, his primary duty is to pass on that divine knowledge, that wisdom to the gods. And therefore, the Pushya native can be a teacher, mentor, guide, trainer, even a consultant of some kind. As per mythology, Lord Brihaspati is known to guide Lord Indra, who's known to be the king of the heavens, and that may translate to the Pushya native being the advisor to the king. Like in those movies we see from ancient times, that the king has an old, wise guide, a mentor. The king consults that mentor. What should be the strategy? That old, wise mentor is Lord Brihaspati-like, and therefore is linked directly to Pushya. Lord Brihaspati, therefore, not only guides the king on how the kingdom needs to be run, it also guides the king on how the kingdom can be protected. Therefore, political science, warfare, even economic policy are directly linked to Pushya. I'd also add public administration, so bureaucrats, politicians are seen from Pushya, and the philosophy behind law and order. Different countries have a different philosophy. Their laws are different. Who thinks about which laws should be part of the country's constitution? A Pushya-like person. So framing the constitution is directly linked to Pushya. I'd mentioned about protecting the kingdom. A Pushya native can be an excellent strategist in warfare. Wars are fought, but someone has to plan a strategy, and that's a Pushya-like person. And don't think that Pushya's job is merely to guide and mentor the kings, or in our world it can be a guide or a mentor to a C-level executive. The person oneself can find oneself in a leader's position, such as a politician, and in that position the person can end up guiding the society. As a society now, we are going to reduce consumption of plastic. We are now going to start moving towards electric vehicles or use of hydrogen, so that policy level decisions come from a Pushya-like person, in my view. I have 4 great examples which would help you understand the role of Lord Brihaspati and Pushya much better, which I'd share later. Let's go back to where I started. I had mentioned that Pushya reminded me of Lord Krishna being the milker of the elixir of the Bhagavad Gita. He is extracting the true meaning of the Bhagavad Gita for us. That extraction process, that milking process, is linked to Pushya, and therefore some astrologers also consider the udder of the cow as also a symbol of Pushya. Whilst this is a metaphor of that spiritual wisdom, which is that milk extracted for us by our teacher, by our guru, it can also be applied literally, and in that scenario the native can be in the milk business, can have a bakery, can be in the business of cattle rearing. Anything to do with the milk sector is now linked to Pushya. I must add, a Pushya native can also be an excellent motivator. Motivators are the ones who inspires us to look at life differently. They go beyond the physical plane of name and fame being the purpose of life. They help us see things differently. I think spiritual leaders are a great example of what Pushya is all about. You go to any spiritual seminar, they talk about renouncing the pleasures of the material world, or at least renounce the expectations that we have when we make an effort in the world. That is what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. It's not about renouncing the world itself, but the pleasure we get from doing something. Like by helping someone, we expect something in return. And that expectation of reward for things done in the society is something we need to renounce. And that thought comes from Pushya. So you must understand the depth of this nakshatra and the purpose of this nakshatra. Going back to the milk example, I'd like to add that since Pushya falls entirely in the sign of Cancer, so moon is having a strong influence on how this nakshatra is like, and its planetary ruler is Saturn, very important. So if you combine all of this, Jupiter's exaltation, most importantly, and then Moon and Saturn's rulership, this may translate to the person being very inclined towards serving the society. Moon-Saturn's togetherness is an indication of that. Social workers are seen having a strong Pushya's influence in their life, and that's due to Moon and Saturn's rulership. I'd even extend that to healthcare workers. So Pushya not only is linked to the education sector, it's also linked to the healthcare and the social services sector. And a great example right away I'd like to share with you is of Mother Teresa. She has Venus, which is ruling her career-related houses in her chart, in the 8th house in Pushya. This is a strong indication of a social worker. If you go through logically, you must understand the examples I'm sharing with you logically. They should make sense to you. Study the meaning of the 8th house. Study the meaning of Venus and Pushya. You'll arrive at the same conclusion. That yes, this person can be a social worker. And I've also seen examples, apart from her, who have a similar combination, who have an inclination towards the social service sector. So she's a great example. Let's see how this nakshatra is classified. I've already mentioned that this nakshatra belongs to the Gana of Deva, which translates to divine thinking, divine temperament. Interestingly, this nakshatra has the caste belonging to a warrior, a Kshatriya. We must look at this classification more closely. Here, the reference is not to the soldier on the battlefield, but the strategist behind that soldier, like a defense minister. Those are the ones who are making policy level decisions. They are the ones who are deciding what strategy needs to be adopted. So the ones who are in a leader's position in the society are seen having a strong Pushya's influence. It'll come as some surprise to you that this nakshatra has the guna, the quality of tamasic, which translates to darkness. It's counterintuitive, firstly. This nakshatra seems a lot about philosophy and spirituality and divinity and truthfulness and righteousness. But why tamasic? Let's look at this more deeply. Firstly, all Saturn ruled nakshatras are classified having this guna. So it's Saturn's rulership which is behind this tamasic energy. What is Saturn's inherent nature? Single-mindedness, seriousness, non-pleasure seeking, even renouncing one's family or the pleasures of life for one's purpose. Those are the things you link to Saturn, and that might be seen in the person's way of doing things. So the person may feel very duty-bound, that the person may go to the extreme and miss out on the lighter moments of life. So do you understand? Even though the person might be doing something which is extremely meaningful, but working tirelessly and even giving up on family time, that's the practical example, is my understanding of why this nakshatra has this tamasic guna. And a great example is of Srinivasa Ramanujan. He has Saturn in Pushya. Yes, his research is still inspiring researchers, but his life story tells us why this nakshatra is tamasic. Doing his research tirelessly, endlessly, it did affect his personal life and his health. And therefore this is the side of Pushya that the native needs to be careful about. There's another very interesting story, and that's linked to Lord Brihaspati's personal life. His wife Tara left him as Lord Brihaspati took a vow of celibacy. She left for Moon, and Moon and Tara together gave birth to Mercury. Soon enough, Tara decided to return to Lord Brihaspati, who decided to forgive Tara and raised Mercury as his own son. A few things you can conclude from this story. Lord Brihaspati's seriousness, single-mindedness towards his job to guide the world, to guide the gods, that his personal life was affected. And secondly, his generosity and forgiveness. He embraced Mercury and raised Mercury as his own. Now, this is interesting. Jupiter signifies knowledge, wisdom, and his son Mercury signifies intellect. So in a way, wisdom is the father of intellect. These days, when I do anything, and if someone says you've done this very intelligently, I don't really like it that much. I would much rather prefer someone says to me that you've done this wisely. There's a difference. I think with intelligence there's always calculation, particularly in business. It's all calculation. Something's being offered to you for free. There's a calculation that this person, when returning, would end up buying more. There's a calculation. That's intelligence. With wisdom, I think you offer something without having the same calculation, or the calculation is not as commercial, like you offer someone guidance. You're not expecting perhaps something in return. You feel you've done something good in the society, you've guided someone, and that person might guide someone else. Misguidance is actually the greatest issue we are facing in the society. You pick up any sector, politics, spirituality, astrology, there are more people misguiding us than guiding us, and therefore you must also carefully examine your actions. And I know I've sidetracked from the Pushya story, but I wanted to share my views on it as well. And the last classification that I'd like to share, which again would be counterintuitive, is that it has the nature of Shipra, which translates to fast moving. Now, Saturn is the ruler of this nakshatra. How can this be fast moving? My understanding is this is referring to Pushya natives' quick grasping ability, the ability to understand the complexity of a complicated problem. Go back to the example of Srinivasa Ramanujan. His work, extremely complicated. He achieved all of it at a very young age. So naturally, he was able to grasp the complicated formulas, mathematical in nature, very quickly. So that is my explanation behind this classification. Bill Gates is a great example. He has his rising nakshatra as Pushya. In a way, he's trying to play the role of a teacher, a mentor to the society. Since the time he's given up on his business from full-time duty, he has been a humanitarian. I think he's a great example of Pushya. Another great example is of Barack Obama. It doesn't have to be that the person is a philosopher sitting behind a desk. The person can be an active public figure, and that is seen in his chart. Mercury ruling his career-related house is in the house related to people. Mercury in the 7th in Pushya. So he's a public figure sharing his ideas and philosophies. And this nakshatra belongs to the caste of a Kshatriya, which translates to a leader. So he's another great example. So if you have your rising as Pushya, firstly you're going to be someone who thinks philosophically. You're going to be caring and protective, not only towards your family, but also towards the society. Like you naturally feel drawn to the idea of recycling, not only plastic, but also food items. converting that into soil, for example. You'd also be known for your wisdom, your generosity. You could find many opportunities to learn in life, either through an institute or through life experience. It would very significantly depend on where Moon and Saturn are placed, the sign ruler and the nakshatra ruler, and we'd also have to see in which sign does this nakshatra fall in the D9 chart, which pada. The signs would be Leo, Virgo, Libra and Scorpio. In the sign of Leo, I think you'd find yourself as a leader in the society, a leader who is leading on the basis of your philosophical thinking. Bill Gates actually has his rising falling in the sign of Leo in the Navamsha. If it's the sign of Virgo, I think you combine your analytical and logical thinking with your philosophies. You become very service oriented. If it's the sign of Libra, firstly, you have a very attractive personality, and so the way you express yourself, the impression you make on people, not only is on the basis of your knowledge and perspective, but also the artistry with which you explain things or express yourself. If the sign is Scorpio, then you become very research-oriented, research-minded. If a planet falls in Pushya and in the D9 it falls in the sign of Scorpio, research and academics can be your future. So whilst understanding any planet's position in Pushya, you must take into account where Saturn is placed, where Moon is placed, and where is it placed in the D9 chart. But studying planet Pushya in isolation is a good start. So let's do that. So when you have Moon in Pushya, you have the capability to think very deeply, very philosophically, and you are going to be seen as someone very wise and mature. That is the capability you possess. You're naturally going to be very protective of people around you. If Moon is in Pushya and is linked to your career-related houses, career in the education sector linked to healthcare, or a business in the milk sector can be your future. Moon, as per some astrologers, is known to belong to the caste of a merchant. You'd have a great understanding of righteousness, truthfulness, justice, what is wrong, what is right. The only downside is that people might perceive that you come across as someone who knows a lot, so you may not be very receptive to the opinions of others, and that might also come from your own deep thinking of a concept. Sometimes it happens that we understand something so deeply that if someone else has presented an opinion, we discard it. We feel, no, this person hasn't thought about things as deeply. And that is the only downside, and I'm referring to the tamasic side of this nakshatra. I think Moon Pushya is a strong position. Even if you may not be directly involved in social service or healthcare sector, you may indirectly be involved in some ways, as it's the coming together of Moon and Saturn. When Sun is in Pushya, here you find yourself as a philosophical leader, or a politician, a business leader, building the strategy, framing the vision, the mission, the company, plans. Now, both Sun and Pushya belongs to the caste of a Kshatriya. So leadership is your future. One way or the other, you'd find yourself occupying that position. The good news here is that your leadership style is built on a philosophy. So people respect you not only for the position you occupy or the position that demands respect, like you being the Prime Minister. So people respect you for your position. Not only that, they also respect you for your vision for the country. Sun Pushya-like person has the capability to be that person, a top bureaucrat, or the ones who were in a leader's position from the government side during COVID. COVID-related policies were framed to protect us, and a Sun Pushya-like person can be behind it. Sun is directly linked to eradication of diseases, and Pushya is indirectly linked to the healthcare sector. Sun symbolizes our soul, and so there's a high possibility the person can be very spiritually inclined and can even be a spiritual leader of some kind if Sun is placed and linked to houses related to one's personality in particular. The person would be renowned for one's consistency and nobility. The word of honor, I think, belongs to a Sun Pushya-like person. The person would walk the talk, would lead by example. The only downside is that the person may come across as someone who knows a lot. Imagine a king who's also knowledgeable about spirituality. The king may not handle that responsibility, the responsibility of knowing spiritual wisdom very well. Knowledge can also be some sort of a superpower, and not everyone can handle it, and a Sun Pushya-like person needs to handle this delicately. Spirituality should not be mixed with political science. On the whole, I find Sun Pushya to be a strong position. I think researchers, scientists, educators who make a huge name in the society have a strong Sun Pushya's influence in their charts. When Mercury is in Pushya, the person's philosophies are going to be practical, actionable, and the person would make an excellent counselor, consultant, a public speaker of some kind. Barack Obama comes to mind, Mercury in Pushya. The person could make an excellent business leader. People would want to follow a Mercury Pushya's lead, like a business person who runs the business so well that other companies want to follow that company. Like a company says, we are now going to stop using plastic anywhere in our production. So other companies start following that lead. So decisions of that kind, which not only have an impact on the business, but also on the environment. So all professionals who find themselves working in corporate social responsibility, I think, are linked to Mercury in Pushya. So you're combining business with philosophy. You're not only looking at profits, you're also looking at sustainability, not only of your business, but of the society on the whole. The person would be able to explain things very well. It's great to think deeply and philosophically and have some ideas, but if you don't convey your ideas clearly, then there's no point. So a Mercury Pushya-like person can make an excellent public speaker, as I mentioned earlier, and on a different plane, the person can be a teacher, even a counselor. The person can also be an advisor on political science, on law, on economy. The person can also be in the business linked to the milk sector. The only downside is that the person's philosophies, despite being very practical, can also be short on detail. Mercury is known to be very fickle and restless. So the person may not think things through as much as a Saturn Pushya-like person might do. And therefore the person might be more suited for building a business strategy versus building a war strategy. A business strategy perhaps does not require the same level of seriousness as a war strategy. There's less at stake. So the only downside here is that Pushya demands that things are studied carefully and thoughtfully, and a Mercury Pushya-like person may not be very thorough. Having said that, the person would be very quick in understanding different philosophies and different concepts, but may not end up being a master of any of them. That's my view of Mercury in Pushya. When Venus is in Pushya, the person thinks of love philosophically, the purpose of love, the idea behind marriage, the reason for companionship. And so the person, I believe, would also seek a philosophical bond with one's partner. The person can make an excellent art director, as here we are combining Jupiter's wisdom. Pushya is where Jupiter is exalted, with Venus, which symbolizes art of all kinds. So we come across museums where art is displayed and there's a story on how that piece of art came about. That's a very Venus Pushya-like thing. Museums, I would say, are directly linked to Venus in Pushya. Art galleries, places where we witness the creation of something and the reason behind it, like drawing classes. That's another great example. A brief is given to you and then you draw based on that, and then a meaning is drawn from it, from your drawing. That you've drawn it this way, perhaps you're thinking in this way, and that might help you in that way, using art as therapy. That's another great example. The person can also find oneself dealing with money very responsibly, and if Venus is in Pushya, in the career-related houses, the person can consider career and risk management. Venus Pushya is the coming together of two extremes when we talk about material pleasure. Pushya I'd describe as non-pleasure seeking, whereas Venus is all about seeking pleasure. So here the person may find pleasure in achieving something which has taken oneself a long time. Like the person enjoys the journey of finding one's life partner, that I struggled and struggled to meet someone who I'd like, and finally I found that person. Like some people like to climb a mountain and it takes them several hours to climb it. So the pleasure of the achievement of having climbed the mountain, I think, is a very Venus Pushya-like pleasure. The journey itself was very tiring, that's Saturn, but there's a sense of achievement and pleasure at the end, that's Venus. Venus belongs to the caste of a Brahmin, and this nakshatra also is all about teaching. I see a teacher of art, I see a teacher of money, I see a teacher who can be an expert on relationships. And not only personal relationships, the person can also be a guide on how to build relations in business, customer relations, supplier relations, business relations within the industry. A Venus Pushya-like person would have the wisdom to handle such positions, that's my view. public administration and general management. The person would be an expert in handling people. So any job that requires such responsibility, I think you'll do really well if Venus falls in Pushya, and that's also likely to be your nature, that you manage people well. When Mars is in Pushya, this translates to execution of the policy Pushya is known for. The constitution now is already framed. Now, a Mars Pushya-like person is going to enforce that, and therefore, lawyers, police officers, ministers are seen having Mars in Pushya. So you must understand the difference now. Mars is all about doing things, and Pushya is all about a broad philosophy. So Mars Pushya-like person can be executing that vision. This can even lead to an interest in yoga. Yoga is a philosophy. It's a great example. And Mars is all about doing things. So a yoga teacher is using that philosophy behind the different postures. Mars is directly linked to the entire engineering sector. And when Mars is in Pushya, the person is combining Martian technical ability with a philosophy of some kind. Like working for those big companies in the oil and gas sector and companies run by the government. So the government has a policy that these are the zones we can extract oil from, these are the zones we need to avoid. So that's the policy. So a Mars Pushya-like person is now executing that policy. And this is just an example. It can happen in many other sectors too. So you must use your imagination. Mars understands the complexity of things very quickly. Therefore, I link Mars to the field of mathematics, and this nakshatra has the nature of Shipra. The person can also excel in complex mathematics or the finance sector, the field of economics. Mars is known to be a protector, and this nakshatra is directly linked to the social services industry, and therefore the person can be a social activist. Earlier I had mentioned the person can be a police officer or a lawyer, which are also similar. Mars Pushya. That's going to be the nature of the person. The person is very protective of one's family, one's country, and the society on the whole. Mars belongs to the caste of a Kshatriya, and so does this nakshatra. So the person would find oneself in a leader's position of some kind, like a team leader in the engineering sector, a chief technology officer. Mars understands the complexities very well. An army general, Mars Pushya. The only downside to this position is the person can go to the extreme. This nakshatra has the guna of tamasic. Earlier I had mentioned the person can work tirelessly, single-mindedly on one thing, and with Mars there, the person would never give up. The person might feel this is a mission, it has to be accomplished, or else our policy or our vision or our mission would be unfulfilled. It reminds me of a soldier from the Second World War. I heard that story. A Japanese soldier who, even after the war was over, was hiding somewhere in Southeast Asia. You must Google this story. That is an example of a tamasic energy of a Mars Pushya-like person. The person continued to be on a mission even when the war was over, and in fact the person continued to remain in hiding for many years, not just a few days. That's the downside. Altogether, I find Mars Pushya to be a strong position. The person can or would have the ability to bring to life a philosophy, a philosophical thought. Like a country decides that we are going to cut emissions, the environment minister is now executing that desire. That's very Mars Pushya-like. When Saturn is in Pushya, the person is going to be relentless in one's pursuit to understand the complexity of what the person is trying to understand. This is an excellent combination for a researcher. Srinivasa Ramanujan is the example I had shared with you earlier. The person may be very hard-working, very duty-bound, very serious, very single-minded, and over time the person is going to turn out to be the master in one's field. Saturn Pushya also belongs to healthcare workers, as Pushya falls in the sign of Cancer, and social workers. The person may also have that inclination or that character, naturally very service-oriented. Everything the person would do would be very thought through. The person would also be very methodical, very detail-oriented. So you combine Saturn's determination with Pushya, which has to do with a philosophical understanding of things. So here Saturn finds a higher purpose, to continue to work hard, to keep working hard over a long time. It's great in some ways and not so great in other ways, as this Nakshatra and Saturn, both of them, have this tamasic energy. And so the person can go to the extreme, working tirelessly and not fulfilling the obligation the person might have towards one's family, even towards one's friends. So work can become the focus of your life if Saturn falls particularly in the houses related to your career. And in general, your personality would also be shaped by this position. You'll have a serious outlook towards life. Like people say, I don't take life too seriously. That's not Saturn Pushya. The person actually takes life very seriously, and that's Saturn Pushya. Pushya also is linked to ancient sciences, and so is Saturn. So the person can be an expert in some ancient science, and the person may also be very traditional. The person may follow rituals from the past, and in thinking the person can be very conservative. Saturn knows how to manage a kingdom, so public administration, political science, even building a war strategy. And the person may not actually be in a leader's position, but may actually be the main or the most trusted confidant of the leader, as that's Saturn's role, like a chief operating officer in a big company. The most important personality aspect would be the person's reliability. You would always bank on a Saturn Pushya-like person to achieve the task, and that reliability would be very confidence-giving to the native's colleagues at one's workspace or the native's family, that they can rely on the native. That's Saturn Pushya for you. Jupiter in Pushya is a very strong position. Jupiter is exalted here, so you naturally have a philosophical view on life, and you must explore thinking about things philosophically. Simple things like friendship. Why do we need friends? Would our friends be in our life if it wasn't convenient for them? Would you be in their life if it wasn't convenient for you? You must think of things philosophically and deeply. You have the ability, the wisdom to understand things. You are very likely to be spiritually inclined. You can be an inspiration for others in the field of judiciary, in the field of political science, or public administration, economics, law and order, or even spirituality, irrespective of where Jupiter is placed in your chart. You are likely to make an attempt to be on the right side of everything, to be truthful and honest. You could be known for your morality and your honesty wherever you are. Jupiter in Pushya is a strong position. And in the field of education, I believe you'll find plenty of opportunities to study further, This is an excellent position if you'd like to do your master's or second master's or go for a PhD. You may even get to travel for the purpose of education, as we are combining the main planet linked to travel, foreign travel in particular, which is Jupiter, with the education sector, which is Pushya. And you have the ability, very importantly, to extract the true meaning of a complex topic to others, like someone who's explaining the Bhagavad Gita. So you extract, or you make an attempt to extract the true meaning of the Bhagavad Gita to the world. That's Jupiter and Pushya for you. As such extraction requires wisdom and patience. It's a coming together of wisdom and patience, Jupiter and Saturn. The only downside is that you may understand what you are doing from a work point of view, for example, or on life. You may understand it so deeply and so philosophically that you may not be open to receiving an opinion from others, as that's the tamasic energy that's linked to this nakshatra. Having said that, the person is going to remain very open to learning and would not shy away from admitting to one's misunderstanding of a concept. Altogether, Jupiter in Pushya is a strong position. You may also be known for your generosity and forgiving nature. Rahu in Pushya can lead to an unconventional educator. And that's very common in the modern world, where we find teachers teaching online, similar to what I'm doing. Unfortunately, I don't have Rahu in Pushya, but that's a great example. Through online, through this video, I'm trying to explain something, and that's Rahu in Pushya. Rahu is linked to technology, and Pushya is directly linked to the education sector. The person's philosophies can be very uncommon. The person can initiate a new philosophy, a new way of life, a new way of doing things. And the person may gather others around one's philosophy. And so, keeping in view the tamasic energy linked to Rahu and Pushya, this can also lead to a creation of a philosophy which isn't always right. So this is where philosophical thinking can also lead to a nuisance in the society, or a right philosophy is practiced in a wrong way, like we've started to see in sports, for example, that there's a person who's holding a banner saying "no more oil" running across the cricket field. That's happened recently. So the philosophy is right, that we must become carbon neutral, or we must take steps to not use oil in some ways, but the execution of that idea, or the way you are promoting that idea, is not right, or it doesn't seem right. And that's Rahu Pushya. So either it's the case that the philosophy itself is questionable, or the execution of the philosophy or the promotion of the philosophy is done through wrong means. That's how I see Rahu and Pushya. And a Rahu Pushya-like person can delude oneself into thinking they are doing the right thing, they are helping the society, but eventually they are not helping the society. So this is a difficult position. Although Rahu can find oneself under more difficult nakshatras, so relatively it's not as difficult, but amongst planets in Pushya, Rahu Pushya can lead to creation of ideas which can have a negative impact on the society in some ways. On the bright side, Rahu is linked to all things foreign, and Pushya is linked to the education sector entirely. So a Rahu Pushya-like person can become an expert in a technique followed in a foreign country. Rahu is a very smart planet in this nakshatra, possesses the nature of Shipra, which translates to quick thinking. So the person might be able to quickly understand different philosophies very well. The person would not be a master of any particular science or philosophy, but maybe someone who's aware of different philosophies, that I have read the Chinese philosophy, I have read the Korean philosophy, I've read the French philosophy. So the person can be a student who's hopping from one area to the other, and that may translate to the person wanting to learn many different things at one time. So a Rahu Pushya-like person may lack the commitment in one's learning related endeavors. The person can be an expert in foreign affairs and economic policies followed by different countries, or wars going on in different countries. So the person can be very actively involved in learning about foreign affairs in particular. The major downside is that the person can find oneself working tirelessly on one thing for a very long time, and with the passage of time the person may discover that I have been working on the wrong idea. So getting proper guidance would be crucial for a Rahu Pushya-like person. That's my view. Ketu in Pushya creates an excellent environment for you to find answers within. So you can become a student of spirituality and philosophy, and you may enjoy spending time with yourself, exploring that side of life. Ketu is directly linked to ancient sciences, past life skills. So the person may naturally be an expert of a science unknown to the person in this life, but the person might feel, I don't know why, but I feel I'm an expert in this. I haven't learnt it, but I was naturally drawn to it. Like a person who's built one's career in finance suddenly finds, no, Ayurveda, I really feel it's logical and scientific, so I'm going to give up my career in finance to pursue Ayurveda. So that's a past life association. Ketu is known for piercing logic and strategic planning, and this nakshatra is all about that too. So the person can be an expert in warfare in particular, having a strategy on how to defeat one's enemies. The person can also make an expert policy maker in the finance sector. And with Ketu's piercing logic, the person would have the capability to understand complex concepts very easily. The downside to having Ketu in Pushya is that you isolate yourself from the society in pursuit of your goals, whether those goals are linked to your research or on a spiritual plane. And lastly, whilst a Ketu Pushya-like person can be an expert in something, perhaps due to a past life association, but in this life the person may lack proper guidance, and just like Rahu, a Ketu Pushya-like person must also seek proper guidance. That's my view. Hello, thank you for watching. This is all that I had to share on Pushya. If you have any questions, please post a comment, and if you'd like to stay in touch, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.